A single father walked into a billionaire's company asking for a janitor's job, but the moment CEO Claire Whitmore read the name Ethan Cole, her hand froze over the application, 8 years earlier before the Glass Towers magazine covers and billion-dollar deals. Claire had been one missed opportunity away from losing everything. Then, on a freezing Pittsburgh morning, a stranger returned the one thing that could save her future and disappeared before she learned his name. Now that stranger sat in her lobby wearing repaired shoes, carrying overdue bills, and thinking only about getting home in time for his daughter. This is not just a story about wealth meeting hardship. It is about integrity, second chances, and the quiet choices that can change a life. Stay until the end. Like the video and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The elevator doors opened behind Claire, but Ethan did not move. For a moment, the lobby seemed to hold its breath around them. Employees passed through the marble entrance. Security gates clicked. Phones rang at the reception desk, yet the space between Ethan Cole and Claire Whitmore remained strangely still. Ethan looked down at the application in her hand, then back at the woman whose face appeared on business magazines across the country. "You saved this company before it existed," she had said. His first reaction was not pride. It was caution. "I returned a portfolio," he said. "That is all." Claire studied him as if the last 8 years had collapsed into a single morning. It was not all. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had come prepared to answer questions about cleaning chemicals' overnight availability and whether he could lift 50 pounds. He had not come prepared to stand beneath a 40-foot company logo while a billionaire looked at him as if he had stepped out of a memory she had never buried. He slipped one hand into his coat pocket and felt the yellow ribbon Grace had tied around his finger before school. Claire glanced toward the private elevator. "Would you come upstairs with me?" Ethan looked toward the security desk. "I am scheduled with Human Resources. You are speaking with the Chief Executive Officer. That does not usually make Human Resources less important." Something flickered across Claire's face. Surprise, then respect. She turned to Megan. "Please tell Paula that Mr. Cole's interview has been moved." Ethan picked up the worn leather folder containing his work records, moved to what Claire met his eyes, a conversation. They stepped into the elevator together. The mirrored walls reflected two people who looked as though they belonged to different worlds. Claire wore a charcoal suit cut precisely to her frame. Ethan's shirt had been ironed carefully, but the collar had softened with age. A narrow line of glue showed at the toe of his left shoe. He noticed her noticing it. She looked away first. When the doors opened, Megan led them into Claire's office. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over downtown Pittsburgh, where the rivers folded together beneath a low winter sky. Ethan took in the view only briefly. Then his attention shifted to the building itself. The vent above the western windows rattled each time the heating system engaged. A faint vibration moved through the wall behind a walnut cabinet. Claire set his application on the desk. "Please sit." Ethan sat across from her and placed his folder on his knee. Claire crossed to a bookshelf beside the window. A red leather portfolio stood behind a glass door. Its corners were worn and the brass clasp had been repaired. She lifted it carefully. "I kept it," she said. Ethan looked at the portfolio. "I can see that." She placed it on the desk between them. "The first battery system Northline patented began in these pages. The original equations are here, so are the failed designs and every calculation I made before anyone believed the idea could work." Ethan leaned back slightly. "You built the company. I carried a bag. You found it on a bus in the middle of a snowstorm." "Yes." "You walked across the city. The buses stopped running. You arrived at 4 in the morning. 4:11. You remember the time I had to be at work by 6? That answer seemed to affect her more than any dramatic explanation could have. "I tried to find you," Claire said. "For how long years?" "Why?" "Because I never thanked you properly. You tried. I offered you $40. You had 37. A small smile reached the corner of Ethan's mouth. Claire laughed once under her breath. The memory returned in sharp pieces. 8 years earlier, Claire had lived above a closed bakery in Bloomfield. She had fallen asleep over her calculations and woken in panic when she realized the red portfolio was missing. The investor meeting was at 9. Everything she had worked on for 7 months was inside that case. Diagrams, test results, corrections, and margins filled with ideas she could not reproduce. At 4:11, Someone knocked on her door. A man stood in the hallway wearing a maintenance jacket soaked through at the shoulders. Snow melted from his hair. The red portfolio was tucked beneath one arm inside a grocery bag. "I think this belongs to you," he had said. Claire opened the case, saw the pages, and began crying. The stranger looked away, giving her the privacy of someone who understood that relief could be more exposing than grief. She emptied her wallet onto the counter. "Please take it." He shook his head. "You came all this way. It looked important. It is everything. Then keep your money." She told him she did not know how to repay him. He glanced at the pages. "Make it work." Before Claire could ask his name, the building fire alarm began screaming. An elderly man across the hall appeared with a walker. The stranger crossed to help him. By the time Claire reached the sidewalk, he was gone. The investor said yes that morning. Northline Energy began 18 months later. Now the same man sat across from her with a janitorial application on his knee. "I did not know any of that happened," Ethan said. "I know. Why did you keep looking for me? Because some debts do not disappear when your bank account changes." Ethan's gaze moved to the portfolio. "I never asked you to carry one." The answer settled between them. Claire glanced at his application. "You wrote that you need a shift that allows you to take your daughter to school." "Yes." "How old is she?" 9. "What is her name?" "Grace." The answer softened his voice. Her mother, Ethan, looked toward the windows. "She died 4 years ago." Claire went still. "I am sorry." "So am I." He opened the folder on his knee and removed a work history. "My wife was Laura. She was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when Grace was 4. I was working maintenance at St. Catherine Medical Center. The insurance was good, but the schedule was not." He placed the page on the desk. "I took unpaid leave when Laura got worse. After she died, I could not go back to rotating shifts. Grace had already lost one parent. I was not going to make her wake up wondering which neighbor would take her to school." Claire said nothing. "I worked at an elementary school after that. Then the district outsourced maintenance 6 months ago. Since then, I have done warehouse inventory, overnight deliveries, and repair work when I can find it. You have electrical experience. Some. 11 years at a hospital is not some. I am not licensed to sign engineering plans. That is not what I asked." Ethan leaned back. "I know how old systems behave. I know what happens when 5 contractors touch the same wall over 30 years and none of them update the drawing. I know how to trace a circuit test, a panel, organize parts, and find the repair someone hid because the proper repair cost too much. Why apply as a janitor? Because the shift was open. That cannot be the whole answer. It is the useful answer." Claire waited. "I applied for 32 technical jobs in 5 months. Most required a degree. The rest required hours I could not take. One employer suggested I find someone else to handle my daughter." The anger in his voice stayed controlled. "The night facilities position here ends at 6:30. Grace's school opens at 7:15. I could make both work." Claire looked at the screening notes. No degree. Limited corporate experience. The words were not false. They were simply too small to hold the life sitting in front of her. She closed the folder. "I may have another position." Ethan's face did not brighten. That sentence usually comes before something temporary. It is temporary. Then at least you are honest. Claire opened a site plan on her tablet. Northline has a residential project at Monongahela Heights. 4 apartment towers along the South Riverfront. 428 units. The buildings were completed in 1968. "I know them." "You have worked there, no?" "My father did concrete repair on Tower 3 when I was a kid. He used to say the basement flooded every spring whether it rained or not. That has not improved." She enlarged the plans. "We are installing a local power system. Solar integration, battery storage, emergency backup, and limited grid independence. The engineering team is strong, but the buildings have been altered repeatedly. Walls moved, panels replaced, conduit rerouted. Some permits are missing." Ethan studied the screen. "Who verified the actual installation paths?" "The contractor surveyed them." "That was not my question." Claire felt the smallest pull of a smile. No one has completed a full physical verification. Ethan moved through several pages. "Your battery node is here, Tower 3 basement. That trunk line crosses beneath the laundry room, according to the plan. According to this plan, the laundry room still uses the original drainage channel. It does not. It was sealed in the late 90s. My father complained about that crew for months. The office fell quiet again, but this silence no longer belonged to the past. It belonged to the problem in front of them. "I need someone who understands what drawings," Miss Claire said. "What exactly are you offering a 30-day position as an on-site infrastructure coordinator?" She explained the work. Ethan would compare the plans with the physical buildings, check access points, conduit panels, and existing systems, coordinate inventory and document discrepancies. "To whom do I report the engineering team? If you find a safety issue, they dismiss you. Report directly to me." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "That creates a problem." "What problem, you?" Claire did not react. A man with no degree applies for a janitorial job. The chief executive officer creates a position for him because he returned her property 8 years ago. Then he reports directly to her when he disagrees with engineers who went through the normal process. You think people will assume favoritism? They will not have to assume much. Claire looked toward the city. He was right. "I am not offering this because I owe you. You do not know me. I know enough." "No, you remember enough." The words landed without cruelty. The man who returned that portfolio had a wife waiting at home and a job he thought would last forever, Ethan said. He had never packed a child's lunch at midnight because the morning felt too uncertain. He had never watched an insurance statement decide which treatment his wife could receive. You cannot build a job around a memory of him. "I am not." "Then what are you building it around?" Claire turned the application toward him. Hospital maintenance, electrical repair, inventory control, emergency response, school facilities. The fact that you noticed a problem in my office before we had spoken for 10 minutes. Ethan glanced toward the western wall. "The outlet." "The outlet. It is probably a loose neutral. Facilities has been searching for that sound for 3 weeks. That says more about facilities than it does about me." This time Claire smiled openly. "I am giving you 30 days, a defined job with measurable work. If you find nothing, the project continues. If you find something, we address it. And if I am not useful, you leave after 30 days. No replacement offer. No promise, no story about the man who saved the billionaire. No story, no press release, no press release. My pay should match the work. Agreed. I report through the same system as everyone else. Agreed. If I find a safety issue, I put it in writing before I bring it to you." Claire nodded. "And one more thing," Ethan said. "I cannot arrive before 8:15. For Grace." "Yes." Claire closed the tablet. "That one is not negotiable." Ethan looked uncertain. "You take your daughter to school," Claire said. "Every morning." Something in his expression loosened. He extended his hand. 30 days. Claire took it. 30 days. When he stood to leave, he glanced toward the western wall. "You should shut off the circuit before anyone moves that cabinet. You are still thinking about the outlet. It is still making noise. Buildings introduce themselves to you that quickly. They usually do. And people." Ethan paused at the door. "People take longer." That evening, Ethan stood at the stove in the small apartment he shared with Grace, turning grilled cheese sandwiches in a scratched skillet. Grace sat at the kitchen table beneath a light that flickered whenever the refrigerator started. A spelling worksheet lay in front of her, but she was drawing stars in the margins. Ethan placed a sandwich on her plate. "I got the job." "The cleaning job? Not exactly." He explained the temporary position as simply as he could. "Buildings, wires, old plans, new batteries. Because you knew the rich lady, because she thinks I can help. Can you?" Ethan looked down at his sandwich. "I am going to find out." Grace narrowed her eyes. "Do you like her?" He nearly inhaled a piece of bread. "I met her for 1 hour. That was not a no. She is my employer. She asked you to fix buildings. She asked me to inspect them." "That sounds like fixing before fixing." Ethan pointed toward her worksheet. "That sounds like avoiding spelling." Grace returned to her paper, smiling. After she went to bed, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table with the employment documents spread before him. 30 days. The pay was enough to bring the rent current and replace the brakes on his car. It was also temporary, politically dangerous, and tied to a woman who remembered him as someone better than he felt most days. From the bedroom, Grace coughed once in her sleep. Ethan signed the papers. The next morning, Pittsburgh woke beneath a low ceiling of clouds. Ethan dropped Grace at school at 7:43. She ran toward the entrance, then turned and pointed at him until he held up the yellow ribbon still tied around his finger. Only then did she go inside. At 8:12, Ethan parked outside Monongahela Heights. The 4 brick towers rose above the riverbank, scarred by 50 winters. Laundry moved behind cloudy windows. Children waited beside a chain-link fence while buses hissed at the curb. A polished Northline sign stood near the entrance, powering a safer future. Ethan looked past it toward Tower 3. A rusted conduit entered the basement wall beneath a broken drain pipe. Water had left a dark stain around the opening. He set down his canvas tool bag, crouched, and placed 2 fingers against the metal. A faint vibration traveled through it. Ethan remained there listening. The vibration inside the conduit was faint, almost polite. It came and went beneath the sound of buses pulling away from the curb and wind moving between the towers. He pressed his fingertips to the metal again. Something inside the wall was carrying more than electricity. There was a rhythm to it, a slight pulse followed by a pause, as if a loose connection tightened whenever the system drew power and relaxed when the load dropped. A woman's voice called from behind him. "You planning to introduce yourself, or are you waiting for the building to do it?" Ethan stood. The woman approaching him wore a navy winter coat over a gray maintenance uniform. Silver threaded through her dark hair and a ring of keys hung from her belt. "Denise Parker," she said. "Community Operations. Ethan Cole. I know who you are." The answer carried no hostility, but it did carry a warning. Denise looked at the canvas tool bag near his feet. "Northline told me they were sending an infrastructure coordinator. That is what they put on the paperwork. What would you call yourself?" Ethan looked back at the stained conduit. Someone trying to find out why that line is vibrating. Denise followed his gaze. "That one has been doing that for years. Has anyone tested it? Several people have stood where you are and told me it was normal. Did any of them touch it?" Denise studied him for a moment. "No." Ethan picked up his bag. "Then I should probably start there." The site office occupied 2 connected trailers near Tower 2. Inside, the air smelled of damp coats, burnt coffee, and printer toner. Installation plans covered one wall. Colored lines showed the routes for the new battery network emergency distribution system and solar connections. At a folding table, 3 technicians were reviewing delivery records. Denise introduced Ethan to each of them. Marcus Bell was broad-shouldered and younger than Ethan by a few years. He had a Pittsburgh Steelers mug in one hand and the expression of someone who had already decided the new arrival was a problem. Beside him sat Luis Ramirez, a quiet electrician with reading glasses pushed into his hair. The third man did not stand. Ryan Kessler wore a clean white shirt beneath a Northline jacket. His tablet rested squarely in front of him, aligned with the edge of the table. "So you are Claire's new field coordinator," Ryan said. Ethan set down his bag. "I am the temporary infrastructure coordinator." Ryan glanced at Denise. "That is what I said." Ethan let the difference pass. Ryan pointed to the wall. "The current installation plan is revision 7. You will find access schedules in the shared project folder. Any observations should be submitted through the standard report form. We are entering final integration, so coordinate site access through Marcus and do not interrupt the installation crews unless there is an immediate safety issue." "What qualifies as immediate?" Ryan looked up from his tablet. "Anything that presents direct danger to personnel. What about residents?" A small silence moved through the trailer. Ryan leaned back. "Residents are covered under the same safety protocols." Ethan nodded once. "Good." Marcus took a drink from his mug. "So what exactly are you inspecting the difference between the plans and the buildings?" Marcus looked at the detailed drawings covering the wall. "The plans came from a full architectural survey. Who completed it? Bridgepoint Engineering. Did they open every wall?" Marcus almost laughed. "No one opens every wall." "Then they completed a visual survey." Ryan's expression cooled. "They used digital mapping permit records and building documentation." Ethan walked closer to the plans. The drawings were polished, clean, and confident. Every line met another line exactly where someone expected it to. "When were the original towers constructed?" he asked. 1968, Louis said. "How many major renovations?" Ryan answered this time. 6 documented, Ethan repeated. He turned toward Denise. "What breaks here when the paperwork says nothing is wrong?" Ryan exhaled through his nose. Denise did not hesitate. "Tower 2's elevator loses power during heavy rain. Tower 1 overheats near the boiler room. Tower 3's emergency generator takes too long to settle after a transfer. Tower 4 has lights on the 6th floor that flicker whenever the laundry machines start. Marcus shook his head. Those are existing building issues. Northline's system is designed to stabilize them. Ethan looked at him. You cannot stabilize what you have not traced. Ryan rose from his chair. Mr. Cole, the system has been modeled by licensed electrical engineers. Your role is to document physical access and equipment inventory. My role description includes discrepancies between existing infrastructure and installation specifications. It does. Then that is what I will document. Ryan held Ethan's gaze for several seconds. Through the proper form. Ethan spent the rest of the morning walking the exterior of all 4 towers. He did not take many photographs at first. He watched. He noted where water collected around foundation walls and where newer concrete had been poured over older drainage channels. He counted roof penetrations. He followed conduit as far as the eye could track it before it disappeared behind brick plaster or patchwork repairs. At noon, he found Denise speaking with a resident near Tower 1. The resident was an older man in a wool cap who leaned heavily on a metal cane. This is Mr. Lawson, Denise said. He has lived here longer than most of the wiring. Mr. Lawson looked Ethan up and down. You with the battery people for 30 days, that long if they can tolerate me. Mr. Lawson's mouth twitched. You want to know what breaks I do? The elevator in 3 stops when the river rises. The hallway lights in 4 hum before they go dark. The basement in 1 gets hot enough in January to grow tomatoes. Denise folded her arms. You never told me about the hallway lights. I told the man before you. I have been here 14 years. Then I told the woman before the man before you. Ethan wrote it down. Mr. Lawson pointed toward Tower 4. They fixed those lights 3 times. Every time the humming moved farther down the hall. Ethan looked toward the building. That means they may have repaired the symptom, not the source. Mr. Lawson tapped his cane against the pavement. That is what I have been saying since Clinton was president. During the first 3 days, Ethan did nothing that looked important. He opened service closets. He traced conduit through ceiling spaces where insulation hung in damp strips. He compared panel labels with the actual circuits they controlled. He found abandoned wiring that remained energized and active lines marked as disconnected. In Tower 4, he opened a distribution cabinet labeled Laundry Auxiliary and discovered that it controlled half the lighting on the 6th floor. The official panel map showed no connection between them. He photographed the cabinet, recorded the voltage, and wrote the finding in a squared notebook he carried inside his jacket. Marcus watched him from the doorway. You know there is an app for that. I know. You like paper, I like a record that does not disappear when someone changes access permissions. Marcus looked amused. You expecting someone to delete your work? No. Then why worry? Ethan closed the notebook. I am not worried. I am prepared. By the end of the 3rd day, he had created his own map of the buildings. It was less attractive than the engineering plans. Lines crossed in imperfect angles. Notes crowded the margins. Dates and initials appeared beside old repairs. It was also beginning to resemble the truth. On the 4th morning, Ethan returned to the stained conduit outside Tower 3. Marcus had been assigned to accompany him because Ryan did not want temporary personnel opening panels alone. They entered the basement through a steel door that dragged against the concrete floor. The space smelled of dust, hot metal, and old water. Ethan followed the conduit to a wall behind the laundry room. The official plans showed a continuous trunk line running from the auxiliary panel to the location designated for Northline's battery distribution node. Ethan placed a clamp meter around the accessible section. The reading shifted under load. What are you looking for? Marcus asked. Heat where there should not be heat. That line is old. Old does not mean unstable. He moved the meter farther down. The reading changed again. Ethan aimed his flashlight along the wall and found a rectangular patch where the paint color did not match the surrounding concrete. Someone opened this. Marcus ran his hand across it. Could have been 20 years ago. Could have been last week. They removed the access plate. Behind it, the trunk line had been spliced twice. The first section matched the gauge listed in the plans. The middle section did not. Someone had used a thinner cable for a distance of nearly 4 feet, then returned to the correct size before the line entered the panel. The insulation around one splice was slightly darkened. Marcus lowered his mug. That is not on the drawings. No. Is it dangerous? Ethan measured the temperature, then checked the load. Not right now. That is not an answer. It is the honest answer. He adjusted the meter. At average load, it may remain within tolerance. During a sustained high draw, this section carries more resistance. It heats. The insulation weakens. Maybe nothing happens for years. Maybe it fails the first week the new system reaches full output. Marcus stared at the darkened cable. You think Bridgepoint missed it? I think everyone missed it. Ethan photographed the splice from several angles. He recorded the measurements and submitted a discrepancy report before lunch. Ryan responded within 40 minutes. The wire variance remained within acceptable tolerance for projected demand. The installation would continue according to schedule. Ethan read the response twice. Then he walked to the trailer. Ryan was standing over a table with Luis reviewing a sequence of connection tests. Ethan waited until they finished. You closed the trunk line report, he said. Ryan did not look up. I reviewed it. Did you inspect the splice I reviewed your photographs and measurements? Photographs do not show resistance under sustained load. The projected demand remains below the cable's failure threshold. Based on the average load? Based on the operating model. Did the model include the thinner section? Ryan placed both hands on the table. The difference is within safety margin. Safety margin is not permission to ignore something inside the wall. Marcus looked down at his coffee. Ryan's voice became quieter. You were hired to identify discrepancies. You identified one. Engineering reviewed it. Then put your name on the physical condition. My name is already on the response, not the condition. The condition says a trunk line designed for one gauge contains a 4-foot section of another. Put that in your approval. Ryan stared at him. I do not need instruction from a temporary coordinator on how to document engineering decisions. Ethan held his gaze for another moment. No, you do not. He returned to his desk and printed Ryan's response. He folded the page and placed it inside his notebook. The first rumor reached him 2 days later. A maintenance worker from Tower 2 found Ethan in a service room and closed the door behind them. You should know what people are saying. Ethan continued labeling photographs. What are they saying, that you and Ms. Whitmore knew each other before Northline? That she made this job for you? That part is true. The worker looked surprised. They are saying you saved her life. I returned a portfolio. They are saying you used to date. Ethan stopped writing. That part is not true. They are saying the engineers have to slow down every time you find something because no one wants to upset the CEO's friend. Ethan capped his pen. Thank you for telling me. That is it. What would you like me to do? I do not know. Defend yourself. To whom the worker had no answer. Ethan opened the service room door. The rumors continued without his participation. By the second week, people who had never spoken to him knew a different version of the story. Some believed Claire had hired an old boyfriend. Others believed Ethan had once pulled her from a burning car. One version claimed Grace was Claire's daughter. Marcus heard that one in the loading area and nearly started a fight. Ethan stopped him. You cannot punch every person who repeats something stupid. I was not going to punch him. You had both hands closed. I make fists when I am disappointed. Ethan almost smiled. Marcus leaned against the loading dock. Does it bother you? Yes. You do not act like it. I have work. That is not the same as not caring. Ethan looked toward the 4 towers. No, it is not. Claire arrived at the site on a cold Thursday afternoon. There was no communications team photographer or security detail. Megan drove her in a dark sedan and remained in the office with Denise. Claire found Ethan in Tower 1's basement. Only his boots were visible beneath an access platform. She stood several feet away. Is this how Northline defines infrastructure coordination? Ethan's voice came from beneath the platform. The definition was broad. He slid out slowly. Dust streaked one sleeve of his shirt and a shallow scrape crossed his forearm. Claire looked at the injury. You are bleeding. It is a scratch. It is still blood. That is usually what comes out. She gave him a look. He sat up and wiped his arm with a clean cloth from his tool bag. Claire wore a black wool coat and shoes that belonged in a boardroom, not a basement where water seeped through the concrete. Ethan moved a broken piece of masonry away from her path. She noticed, but did not mention it. What did you find? She asked. He showed her 3 versions of the same conduit route. The current Northline plan placed the line along the eastern wall. A city permit from 1987 placed it near the boiler room. Ethan's physical trace showed that both were partly correct. The original conduit was abandoned here, he said. The newer route crosses behind the boiler exhaust and reconnects near the north panel. Why does that matter? The heat in this room is already above the estimate used in your model. How far above 6 degrees today? The boiler is not running at full winter demand. Claire studied the readings. Did you submit this? This morning. Ryan reviewed it. He marked it for observation. Claire glanced at him. That does not sound like approval. It is not rejection either. It is where concerns go when no one wants to make a decision. Rain began striking the basement windows. By the time they returned to the site office, traffic downtown had slowed and Megan reported that the river roads were backing up. Denise handed Claire a cup of coffee from the vending machine. Claire took one sip and looked at it suspiciously. Ethan sat across from her at the folding table. You do not have to drink it. I have consumed worse things during investor meetings. That does not make this better. Claire set the cup down. A folded drawing had slipped from Ethan's notebook. Claire turned it toward herself. Grace had drawn a man wearing a cape and holding a wrench above a crooked city skyline. Across the top she had written, "My dad fixes what people cannot see." Claire smiled. She thinks highly of you. She thinks I can fix everything. Can you know? The answer came too quickly to be modest. Ethan folded the drawing. I am careful about letting her see what I cannot. Claire looked through the rain-streaked window toward Tower 3. My father believed needing people was a weakness. Did he need people constantly? Did he admit it? Never. Ethan nodded as though the answer confirmed something. He died 5 years before Northline's first public project, Claire said. He saw the early designs. He thought I should sell them to a larger company and get a stable job. You did not. No. Do you regret it? Claire watched workers cover equipment with plastic outside. Ask me on a different day. Ethan understood that answer better than she expected. The rain strengthened. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The quiet did not feel empty. It felt like two people sitting beside parts of themselves they usually kept behind locked doors. Claire looked at his hands wrapped around the paper cup. There was a faint scar across his thumb and grease beneath one fingernail despite repeated washing. Ethan noticed the way she rubbed the inside of her wrist when she was thinking. Why did you really come here today, he asked. To inspect the project. You have people who do that, to see how you are doing. I send reports. Reports do not tell me everything. They tell you what I found. They do not tell me whether anyone is making your work harder because of me. Ethan looked at her steadily. People are talking. I know. Did Megan tell you no two board members asked whether I had hired someone I was personally involved with? Claire's voice remained calm, but color had risen near her cheekbones. Ethan looked down at the coffee. I am sorry, you did not start it. I gave them something to use. I hired you. That is what they are using. Claire leaned closer. Do you want to leave? No, then do not apologize for staying. Their eyes met. For a brief second, the sounds of the trailer faded behind the rain. Ethan looked away first. Megan appeared at the door and told Claire the car was ready. Claire stood. As she reached for her coat, Ethan said, You should have someone check the vent system in Tower 1 before the boilers reach full demand. Put it in writing. I already did. A faint smile touched her face. Of course you did. Grant Holloway arrived the following Wednesday. The crew noticed because the chief financial officer had never visited Monongahela Heights in person. He entered the site office wearing a dark overcoat and shoes polished enough to reflect the ceiling lights. Ryan met him at the door. Ethan watched them speak privately for several minutes before Grant asked to see him. They found an empty storage room in Tower 2. Grant remained standing. I want to be direct. I appreciate that. This project has significant visibility. 3 investors have tied their continued participation to an on-schedule launch. Ethan waited. Northline has invested 2 years and a considerable amount of capital here. Repeated field concerns can create delays far beyond their technical importance. I have submitted 4 discrepancies. 6. 2 were inventory errors. They still required review. That is why reviews exist. Grant looked toward the shelves of electrical supplies. I am not questioning your intentions. You are questioning whether I belong here. I am questioning whether this role as currently structured helps the project reach completion. Ethan rested one hand on a box of cable connectors. I found an undersized trunk line, an undocumented panel connection, and a ventilation condition that raises the basement temperature above your design estimate. Engineering reviewed those findings. Engineering closed too, without a physical inspection. Grant's expression did not change. Documentation can slow a project when every observation is treated as a potential crisis. Ethan looked at him. Is that what you want me to manage? What the documentation? Grant remained silent. Do you want fewer reports or fewer problems? I want judgment. So do I. Grant buttoned his coat. Understand the full picture, Mr. Cole. I think I do. No, you understand the buildings. Ethan's voice stayed even. The people inside them are the full picture. Grant's jaw tightened slightly. He left without another word. 2 days later, Ethan found the first interface module that did not belong. A shipment had arrived for Tower 1. Marcus was checking boxes against the delivery manifest while Ethan verified serial numbers. The part numbers matched at first glance. Then Ethan noticed the final 2 digits. He lifted one module from its protective foam. Hand me the specification sheet. Marcus passed it to him. Ethan compared the thermal ratings. The installed module was approved for a lower operating temperature than the unit Northline had ordered. How much lower, Marcus asked. 14%. That does not sound like much. It is not much in an office. Ethan looked towards Tower 1. In that basement, it is the difference between operating margin and thermal shutdown. They checked another box. Same substitution. Then another. Marcus lowered his voice. Could be a supplier mistake. 1 is a mistake. Ethan turned the module over and photographed the serial number. 3 is a pattern. They spent the afternoon reviewing delivery records. Every invoice listed the correct higher-rated model. Every box they opened contained the lower-rated version. The price difference was not enormous per unit. Across hundreds of components, it became something else. Ethan brought the evidence to Ryan before sending it anywhere else. Ryan reviewed the photographs and part numbers. The difference is marginal. Did you run the thermal model with the installed rating? The system is not designed to operate at maximum load for sustained periods. What happens during a utility outage in January, the batteries compensate. With the boiler room at full temperature, the ventilation system manages ambient heat. It is already 6 degrees above your estimate. Ryan set down the tablet. We have discussed the ventilation issue. No, I documented it. You marked it for observation. Ryan's voice sharpened. The system includes safety margins. Ethan leaned forward. Run the model with the parts that are actually in the building. I will take it under consideration. When I said I will consider it. Ethan watched him for a long moment. Then he gathered the documents. At home that evening, Grace sat at the kitchen table constructing a paper model of the solar system. Saturn's ring had collapsed and Jupiter leaned against a glass of milk. Ethan's laptop was open beside her glue sticks. He completed the report with photographs, serial numbers, thermal ratings, delivery records, and a clear description of the failure conditions. He submitted it to the project server. Then he sent a copy directly to Claire. His phone rang 10 minutes later. He stepped into the hallway. Claire did not waste time. Walk me through it. Ethan explained the substitution, the lower thermal rating, and the conditions inside Tower 1. She asked precise questions. He answered each without adding anything the evidence did not support. What happens if the system launches as designed, she asked. Probably nothing on launch day. And later, during sustained demand, the modules heat beyond their rated range. They throttle to protect themselves. That creates voltage instability at the interface point. Could they fail? Yes. How soon I cannot tell you. Claire was silent. What would you do? She asked. That is your decision. I am asking for yours. Ethan looked through the open kitchen door. Grace was holding Saturn together with both hands waiting for glue to dry. I would stop installation, inspect every module, run the thermal model with the equipment that was delivered. Bring in someone independent. That delays the launch. Yes, and if you are wrong, you lose time. He lowered his voice. If I am right and you continue, someone upstairs may lose more than that. The line went quiet. Claire finally said, Thank you. Ethan returned to the kitchen. Grace had drawn an extra planet in the empty corner of the page. What is that one? He asked. Yours. I do not think I get a planet. You need somewhere quiet. Across the city, Claire remained alone in her office. Ethan's report filled the screen before her. A notification appeared in the company system. Project concern unauthorized technical assessment by temporary coordinator. Claire opened the message. The photographs were missing. The thermal data was missing. The invoiced comparison was missing. Only one sentence remained beneath Ethan's name. The temporary coordinator has raised concerns outside the defined scope of his position. Claire read the sentence twice. It did not say that Ethan had compared the installed modules with the approved specifications. It did not mention that the invoices listed equipment Northline had never received. It did not include the temperature limits, the photographs, or the failure scenario. The message transformed evidence into behavior. She clicked the attachment field. Empty. Claire picked up her phone and called Grant. He answered on the second ring. "You are working late. So are you. I am reviewing the Riverside funding package. I am looking at a project notice about Ethan Cole." Grant was quiet for half a second. "I saw it. Did you authorize it? I authorized a review of his report." "This is not a review. It is a warning about his conduct. He submitted an engineering assessment outside his assigned authority. He documented the wrong equipment inside one of our buildings. Ryan reviewed the components. Did Ryan inspect them? I would have to ask him. You have not read Ethan's full report." It was not a question. Grant sighed. "Claire, the report is 18 pages long and includes an operating scenario based on assumptions that have not been confirmed. The part numbers are not assumptions. No. But the conclusion is, the installed equipment has a lower thermal rating, and Ryan believes the design margins can absorb the difference." Claire looked through the windows at the dark city below. "Believes he is the lead engineer. That does not answer my question." Grant's voice hardened. "We have an inspection in 3 weeks. Investors are arriving from Boston and Chicago. The city has tied public funding to the launch date. If every field observation becomes an executive emergency, the project stops functioning. If every field observation is treated as an inconvenience, the system stops functioning. This is exactly why executive involvement in a technical dispute creates confusion." "You mean my involvement?" "I mean your relationship with the person who submitted the report." Claire stood. "There is no relationship. You found him through a janitorial application and created a position for him the same day, because his experience matched a gap in the project. That may be true. It does not prevent other people from questioning the process." Claire looked at Ethan's photographs on her private screen. "Have every installed module in Tower 1 inspected tomorrow. I cannot authorize that without consulting the project team. You are the chief financial officer. Which is why I do not issue engineering orders over the phone at 9:30 at night." Claire pressed her fingers against the desk. "Then schedule a review first thing in the morning. I already have, with Ethan present." Another pause. "That may not be advisable. He wrote the report. He is also the subject of the review." Claire's eyes narrowed. "The subject is the equipment, not anymore." The call ended without either of them saying goodnight. By 8 the next morning, Ethan's report had been copied into 3 separate discussion threads. He had access to none of them. At the site office, his project folder still appeared on the server, but the status had changed from open technical review to conduct assessment. Marcus stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. "They made you the problem." Ethan closed the window. "They changed a label. That label decides who gets heard." "I know." Marcus pulled a chair beside him. "You should call Claire." "I already sent her the report." "You should call her again. She has the information. She may not know what they are doing here. She is the chief executive officer." Marcus lowered his voice. "That does not mean everyone tells her the truth." Ethan looked toward Ryan's empty desk. "No, it does not." At 9:15, an email from Human Resources arrived. Ethan's access to the project server would be temporarily restricted while Northline reviewed whether he had submitted technical findings outside his assigned role. The restriction was effective immediately. The folder disappeared from his screen. Marcus swore under his breath. Ethan opened his paper notebook. "What are you doing working? They just cut you out of the system. They did not cut the wires out of the walls." Ryan entered the trailer carrying a tablet. "Ethan, I need your contractor badge." Marcus stood. For what Ryan looked at him. "This does not involve you. It involves the man sitting 3 feet from me." Ethan closed his notebook. "Marcus, Marcus did not move. Go check the Tower 4 inventory. I already checked it. Check it again. Marcus stared at Ryan, then left. Ethan removed the badge from his belt and set it on the table. Am I suspended? Your access is restricted pending review. That is not the same thing. No. Am I permitted to work? You can continue inventory verification and physical access documentation. You are not to open electrical panels or submit further engineering concerns without approval. Whose approval? Mine. Ethan looked at him for a long moment. Did you inspect the modules? Ryan's expression remained flat. This meeting is not about the modules. That is the problem. Ryan picked up the badge. You were given an opportunity here. I was given a job. Then stay inside it. Ethan watched him leave. By noon, everyone at the site knew his access had been restricted. Conversations stopped when he entered rooms. A Bridgepoint supervisor who had shared coffee with him the week before now referred to him as Mr. Cole and kept his hands folded across his chest. Denise found Ethan in the Tower 2 supply room counting cable brackets. They took your badge. Yes. Why are you counting brackets? Because they still need to be counted. She closed the door behind her. You look too calm. I have been less calm before. That is not what I said. Ethan wrote another number on the inventory sheet. Denise moved closer. You expected this. He stopped writing. I expected the possibility. Because of St. Catherine. His eyes lifted. Denise leaned against the shelf. My sister worked respiratory care there. She remembers you. Ethan said nothing. She said there was trouble with the backup generators. That was a long time ago. She said you warned them. Ethan returned his attention to the inventory sheet. People remember stories differently. She remembers the hospital blaming a maintenance technician. That part is not different. Denise waited. Ethan finally put down his pen. 6 years earlier, St. Catherine Medical Center had contracted an outside company to service 3 emergency generators. The company submitted monthly inspection logs. Every test showed successful transfer within the required time. Ethan had been working overnight when a brief utility failure struck the West Wing. One generator started late. Another did not start at all. The hospital's internal systems prevented a disaster, but Ethan began reviewing the maintenance records. The fuel pressure readings were identical across 6 separate months. Not similar. Identical. The timestamps showed tests completed when security footage proved no technician had entered the generator room. Ethan reported it to his supervisor. His supervisor told him the contractor had a strong record and warned him not to make accusations without proof. Ethan repeated the tests himself. 2 generators failed under sustained load. He wrote a report. The contractor disputed his methods. Hospital administrators accused him of exceeding his position and creating unnecessary alarm. Laura had begun treatment that same month. Ethan needed the insurance. He needed the paycheck. He needed to leave the hospital every morning without wondering whether someone had decided he was too difficult to keep. He continued documenting the failures. 3 weeks later, a state inspection confirmed falsified service records. The contractor lost the agreement. The hospital issued a statement praising its safety procedures. Ethan's name was not included. His supervisor told him that his concerns had been valid, but his approach had damaged trust. A promotion Ethan had been promised went to someone else. When Laura's condition worsened, Ethan resigned. I was cleared, he told Denise. That did not put my name back where it was before. You think the same thing is happening here? I think organizations use the same words when the truth arrives at a bad time. Denise looked toward the door. Why did you take this job? I needed the money. That is not what I mean. Ethan folded the inventory sheet. Because Claire looked me in the eye and said the work would matter. Does it? He looked through the small window toward Tower 1. Yes. Then do not let them reduce you to counting brackets. Ethan picked up his notebook. They can reduce my access. They cannot reduce what I already saw. Claire arrived shortly after 4. She found Ethan in an empty meeting room beside the site office. His tool bag sat on the floor near his chair. He stood when she entered. You do not have to do that. I know. Claire closed the door. I spoke with human resources. Then you know they took my access. I told them to preserve every version of your report. Did you stop installation? Ethan looked away. The board authorized a 48-hour technical review, while Bridgepoint keeps installing the same modules, only in Towers 2 and 4. Tower 1 has been paused. That is not enough. It is what I could secure without an emergency board vote. Ethan turned back to her. Then call one. Grant believes that would alarm the investors and the city. Grant is worried about the launch. He is worried about the company. The company is putting equipment into occupied buildings. I know that. Do you? Claire went still. Ethan rubbed a hand across his face. I sent you the numbers. I gave you the part numbers and the invoices. I told you what happens under sustained load, and I ordered a review, while the work continues. I'm trying to keep enough authority to fix this. And I am trying to keep the system from going live before you decide whether fixing it is affordable. The word struck harder than he intended. Claire's eyes changed. You think I care more about money than the people living here? I think everyone cares about people until caring costs something. The room became painfully quiet. Claire stepped closer. You know almost nothing about what I have risked for this company. You are right. You know nothing about the employees whose jobs depend on the next funding round. You are right. You know nothing about the projects that disappear if Northline loses the city contract. You are right. Then stop speaking to me as if I am choosing a launch party over human lives. Ethan's voice softened. I am speaking to you as someone who asked what I would do. And I listened. You listened. You did not act. Claire looked as if he had opened a door she had spent years holding shut. I created this position because I trusted your judgment. No. You created it because you remembered what I did 8 years ago. That is not true. Then why did you bypass the process? Because they would have rejected you. They did reject me. I saw something they missed. And now everyone who disagrees with me can say I am here because you wanted to repay a debt. Claire's expression tightened. I was trying to give you a chance. I did not ask you to protect me from the process. The process never saw you, then change the process. He lowered his voice. Do not build one exception around me and call it fairness. Claire stared at him. Outside, a truck reversed through the yard, its warning alarm repeating in steady intervals. I may have handled the hiring badly, she said. That does not make your work less valid. No, it makes it easier for them to pretend it is. She looked down at his tool bag. Do you want to leave? Ethan's answer came without hesitation. No. Then help me get through the review. Stop the installation. I cannot promise that today. Then I cannot tell you the danger is waiting politely. Claire picked up her coat. At the door, she paused. I do believe you. Ethan looked at her. Belief is not evidence. She opened the door and left. Denise waited until Claire's car disappeared before approaching him. You heard her. Ethan picked up his bag. I know. Was that the point? No, then why say it that way? Because soft words are useful when people are listening. He looked toward the towers. They are not listening. That evening, Denise took Ethan to the 3rd floor of Tower 1. The hallway smelled of boiled cabbage and laundry detergent. A child's bicycle leaned against a wall beneath a sign that prohibited bicycles in hallways. Denise knocked on apartment 312. An older woman opened the door with clear plastic tubing looped over her ears. Mrs. Price, this is Ethan Cole, the battery man, temporary battery man, Ethan said. Mrs. Evelyn Price waved him inside. Her apartment was warm. Too warm. An oxygen concentrator hummed beside a recliner. A battery backup unit sat beneath a table, its indicator light yellow. Ethan crouched beside it. When was this battery replaced? Mrs. Price looked at Denise. Last year. 14 months, Denise said. Ethan checked the label. This should be tested. Mrs. Price lowered herself into the recliner. They told me the new system means I will not have to worry about it. That is the goal. She watched him examine the cord. I do not need perfect, she said. I just need the lights not to make promises they cannot keep. Ethan looked up. There was no anger in her face. That made the words heavier. In Tower 2, Denise introduced him to Tara Jenkins, a young mother holding a sleeping boy against her shoulder. A box fan pointed toward the ceiling because its broken stand would not tilt. My son has asthma, Tara said. When the power goes out, the apartment gets hot fast. How often does it go out long enough that the building stopped giving us forms for every time? In Tower 4, a teenage girl named Maya completed homework at a folding table in the laundry room. The light in her bedroom flickers, Denise said. Maintenance has checked it 3 times. Maya did not look up from her textbook. They say it is safe. Ethan glanced at the fluorescent fixture buzzing above her. People say safe when they mean it has not failed yet. Denise gave him a warning look. Maya looked up. Is that different? Yes. Ethan did not explain further. He walked the buildings until after dark. Windows glowed across the towers. Each square held a kitchen, a sleeping child, an inhaler, a refrigerator filled with medicine, a phone charging beside a bed. From the boardroom, Monongahela Heights was one project. From the courtyard, it was hundreds of separate reasons not to be careless. Grant found Ethan in the site trailer after the crews had left. He came without Ryan and without his tablet. Ethan was organizing printed copies of his notes. Grant removed his coat and placed it over the back of a chair. This conversation is not official. Then you should not have it. I need you to understand something. Ethan continued sorting pages. Grant sat across from him. If the launch is delayed, 3 institutional investors may withdraw from the next funding round. I read the project summary. The public summary does not show the full exposure. Northline has contracts built around this demonstration. If the system does not launch on schedule, 2 other residential projects may lose financing. Ethan looked at him. Then inspect the modules. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. No, it is technically simple. Financially. Legally and politically, it is not. Grant leaned forward. Thousands of people may lose future access to systems like this if Northline fails publicly. The people in these towers are not a demonstration, I know that. Do you? Grant's eyes hardened. You think I sit in an office and move numbers without understanding what they represent? I think you understand them as numbers. That is convenient. No. It is visible. Grant stood and walked to the window. The company employs more than 2,000 people. Their families depend on decisions I make. The city depends on this project. The residents depend on it. There is no choice here that protects everyone. Ethan watched him. That does not make every choice equal. I never said it did. You are asking me to accept the risk because admitting it now costs too much. I am asking you to understand the whole structure. The people upstairs are part of the structure, I know. Then look at the system through their walls, not your funding model. Grant turned. You have the luxury of one responsibility. Ethan's chair scraped the floor as he stood. A system built on parts that cannot survive the conditions inside the building is not a working system. Grant said nothing. It is a liability with a photograph, Ethan continued. A ribbon gets cut. Investors shake hands. The press leaves. Then the heat rises, the load increases, and someone on the 3rd floor discovers the safety margin was a sentence in a report. Grant's expression shifted, but his voice remained controlled. You believe the modules will fail. I believe no one has proven they will not. Grant picked up his coat. Those are not the same statement. They are when people are trusting us with electricity they cannot inspect. Grant opened the door. The review concludes tomorrow. The buildings do not know that. Ethan drove home through freezing rain. Grace was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of cereal when he arrived. It was nearly 8. You ate dinner. I had soup with Mrs. Alvarez. This is after dinner cereal. Ethan took off his wet coat. You should be in bed. You should answer your phone. He checked the screen. 3 missed calls from Grace. I am sorry. Are you losing your job? Ethan stopped. Who told you that? No one. You only forget your phone when you are scared. He sat across from her. The job may end. Did you break something? No. Did you lie? No. Did you yell at the rich lady? Ethan looked down. Not exactly. That means yes. I said something hard. Was it true? I think so. Grace pushed the cereal bowl away. Then why are they mad? Truth does not stop being difficult because it is accurate. That sounds like something teachers say when they do not want to explain. Ethan almost smiled. She studied him. Did you make a mistake? I made people angry. That is not what I asked. He looked at his daughter. No, I do not think I made a mistake. Grace nodded as if she had been waiting for that answer. Then do not teach me to quit when people get loud. The rain struck their kitchen window. Ethan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. You are supposed to be 9. I am. You are not very convincing. She squeezed his fingers. You are still taking me to school tomorrow? Yes. Then go dry your coat. The storm intensified after midnight. Cold rain moved across Pittsburgh in dense sheets, filling gutters with leaves and pushing the rivers against their concrete walls. At Monongahela Heights, Water entered the Tower 3 basement through an old drainage channel beneath the eastern foundation. The sump pumps activated. One failed. At 2:46 in the morning, a lower-rated interface module near the auxiliary distribution line began heating under sustained load. Its control system throttled, voltage dropped, recovered, then dropped again. The irregular sequence tripped an auxiliary breaker. Emergency lights on floors 2 through 4 went dark. Mrs. Price's oxygen concentrator stopped. Its backup battery activated, then sounded a low power alarm. The building generator started but failed to stabilize immediately. For 11 minutes, residents stood in dark hallways lit by phone screens. Denise climbed 3 flights of stairs with a portable medical battery pressed against her chest. No one died. By sunrise, that fact was already being used as proof that the emergency systems had worked. Ethan learned about the outage at 6:12. Denise called while he was making Grace's lunch. "The contractor cannot explain the transfer delay," she said. "Ryan says someone may have disturbed the grounding connection." Ethan stopped spreading peanut butter. "Whose name are they using?" She was silent. "Mine. Yes. I photographed that panel 2 weeks ago. I know. The report has the date and readings. The report is gone from the active folder." Ethan closed his eyes. Grace stood in the doorway wearing her backpack. "Is everyone all right?" he asked. "Mrs. Price is shaken. Her battery lasted. Tara took her boy to the emergency room because the hallway got cold and damp. I will come after school drop-off. Your badge is restricted. Can you authorize emergency access?" Denise looked toward someone speaking in the background. "I can document you as a community consultant. Do it properly." "I will." At 8:17, Claire called. Ethan was sitting in his car outside Grace's school. Children crossed the wet sidewalk beneath bright umbrellas. "I received a formal request to remove you from the project," Claire said. "I expected that. Ryan says you accessed the auxiliary panel before the failure." "I did, once. I photographed the grounding connection. I recorded the voltage and closed the panel. I found the report in the archive. Then, I know what the documentation says." Ethan watched Grace reach the school entrance. She turned and lifted one hand. He lifted his. Claire's voice softened. "Ethan, did you touch anything that was not documented?" "No." "Are you certain about the modules?" "Yes." There was no hesitation. Claire breathed out slowly. "I believe you. Belief is not evidence." "I know." Grace disappeared through the doors. Claire was quiet. "I am sorry this happened. You gave me a fair shot. That is not enough. I did the work. Whatever happens now, do not turn it into a debt. I am not talking about debt." Neither spoke for several seconds. The distance between them felt less like silence and more like a room they had both entered without deciding what they were allowed to want inside it. "I have not approved your removal," Claire said. "The board meets this morning." Ethan looked through the windshield at the rain. "I need to go to Tower 3. Your access is restricted. Denise is authorizing me as a community consultant." Claire closed her eyes on the other end of the call. "Be careful. I will document everything. That is not what I meant." Ethan's hand tightened around the phone. "I know." He ended the call and drove toward the river. Denise met him at the Tower 3 entrance with a printed authorization form. Her signature appeared beside the time. Marcus stood behind her carrying 2 flashlights. "You do not have to come," Ethan said. Marcus handed him one of the lights. "I know." The basement smelled of wet concrete and hot insulation. Water covered part of the floor in a thin, reflective sheet. The auxiliary panel had been opened by the overnight contractor and left exposed. Ethan photographed the condition before approaching. He inspected the grounding connection first. It was secure. The marks on the screws matched his earlier photographs. Nothing had been moved. He followed the event path from the breaker toward the Northline interface line. Marcus held the light while Ethan checked each connection. At the 3rd module, the plastic housing felt warmer than the others. Ethan connected a diagnostic reader. The internal sensor log appeared on the screen. Temperature had risen steadily during the storm. The module crossed its rated operating threshold 4 minutes before the voltage irregularity began. It throttled, recovered, throttled again. The sequence matched the breaker event exactly. Marcus stared at the screen. "You predicted this. I described the conditions. You were right. Take a photograph." They recorded the serial number, temperature readings, voltage sequence, and installation position. Ethan removed the module only after Denise contacted the emergency contractor and documented permission. He sealed it inside an evidence bag. Then he sat on the concrete floor with his back against the wall and opened his laptop. His project access remained blocked. He used the copies saved on his local drive. He placed the new sensor log beside his original report. The predicted sequence and actual sequence aligned line by line. At 6:43, he sent the complete package to Claire's private email. The failed module rested in the canvas bag at his feet. Now what, Marcus asked. Ethan closed the laptop. Now we make sure Mrs. Price has a working backup battery. At Northline headquarters, 7 board members gathered around the long walnut table on the 42nd floor. Rain covered the windows, blurring the distant towers along the river. Grant stood beside the presentation screen. Ryan sat near the far end with 2 Bridgepoint representatives. Claire entered carrying the red portfolio under one arm and her laptop in the other. Grant began with the timeline. He described Ethan's unusual hiring process, his lack of formal engineering credentials, the reports submitted outside assigned scoped the disruption to the project team, and his documented access to the Tower 3 panel. He spoke carefully. Nothing he said was entirely false. That made each sentence more dangerous. A board member named Helen Ward folded her hands on the table. Claire, before we vote, I need to ask directly. Did your personal history with Mr. Cole influence his appointment? Claire looked toward the rain-blurred outline of Monongahela Heights. Yes. The room shifted. She placed the red portfolio on the table. It influenced my decision to read his application. It influenced my willingness to recognize experience our hiring system had dismissed. She faced the board. It does not determine whether his evidence is true. Her laptop chimed. A new message appeared. The subject line read, Tower 3, Failure Analysis and Sensor Log. Claire opened it. Photographs filled the screen. The installed module. The approved specification, the invoice, the internal temperature record. Below them was Ethan's original report written 3 weeks before the outage. Claire looked at Grant. Before anyone votes, there is something everyone in this room needs to see. Claire turned her laptop toward the board. The first image showed the failed module on the concrete floor of Tower 3. Water glistened behind it. A white evidence label had been placed beside the serial number. The second image showed the approved specification sheet. The third showed the invoice Northline had paid. Helen leaned closer. The numbers are different. Yes, Claire said. Grant remained standing beside the presentation screen. Ryan did not move. Claire enlarged the photographs until the final digits of both model numbers filled the wall. The invoice lists a Model 840T interface module. The equipment installed in Tower 3 is a Model 826T. One of the board members, Martin Shaw, adjusted his glasses. What is the practical difference? Claire opened Ethan's summary. The installed unit has a lower operating temperature limit. It is not approved for the conditions Northline specified for these buildings. Ryan leaned forward. That statement needs context. Claire looked at him. You will have an opportunity to provide it. She opened the sensor log. A line climbed steadily across the screen. The temperature rose minute by minute until it crossed a marked threshold. Seconds later, the voltage became unstable. Claire placed Ethan's earlier report beside the new data. His predicted sequence appeared in plain language. Rising ambient temperature, sustained electrical demand, thermal throttling at the interface module, voltage irregularity, auxiliary breaker trip, delayed transfer to emergency power. The actual sensor data followed the same sequence. No one spoke. Rain moved against the windows in soft waves. Helen read the dates at the top of both documents. This report was submitted 3 weeks ago. Yes, Claire said. And the failure occurred last night. Yes. Martin looked toward Ryan. Did you receive the original report? Ryan placed both hands on the table. I reviewed a field report concerning thermal tolerance. That was not my question. Ryan glanced at Claire, then back at Martin. Yes, I received it. Did you inspect the installed modules? I reviewed the specifications and the projected load profile. Did you physically inspect them? No. Did anyone from your engineering team? Ryan's jaw tightened. Not at that time. Helen pointed to the sensor log. Did you run the operating model using the rating of the equipment that was actually installed? Ryan did not answer immediately. The variance was considered within design tolerance. Martin leaned back. That sounds like no. Ryan looked toward Grant. Grant's face had lost some of its careful certainty. Claire closed one image and opened Ethan's first discrepancy report. This was not the first concern Mr. Cole submitted. She displayed the undersized trunk line in Tower 3. The darkened splice was clearly visible. Ryan closed this item without a physical inspection as well. Ryan shifted in his chair. The cable remained within acceptable tolerance under the projected demand. Average demand, Claire said. That is the standard basis for the operating model, not during an emergency event. We cannot redesign every system around every possible extreme. Claire looked at the board. The purpose of emergency power is to operate during conditions that are not average. Martin turned to one of the Bridgepoint representatives. Did your company verify the physical condition of that trunk line? The representative cleared his throat. Our survey was based on visible access points, municipal records, and building documentation. So you did not open the wall? No, Mr. Cole did. The representative said nothing. Helen tapped one finger against the table. Let us return to the module. Is it your position that the wrong equipment was installed? Ryan looked toward the enlarged model numbers. It is clear that the installed model differs from the approved specification. Was Northline informed of a substitution not through my office? Did you approve one no? Then why did you dismiss the report? Ryan breathed in slowly. Because the system included multiple protective layers. The module was not expected to operate near its thermal limit for a sustained period. Claire pointed toward the data. It did, under unusual conditions. Conditions that Mr. Cole described 3 weeks ago. Ryan's eyes hardened. He also exceeded the technical limits of his role. Helen stared at him. His title did not alter the temperature in that basement. The sentence settled over the room. Grant lowered his gaze to the printed report in front of him. Claire watched him. She knew the look on his face. It was the expression of a man trying to decide whether the structure he had protected could survive the truth about how he had protected it. Martin turned toward Grant. When did this report reach executive review? Grant remained silent for several seconds. I received a forwarded copy the day it was submitted. Claire did not move. She had suspected it. Hearing him say it still felt like a door closing. Helen asked, "Did you read it?" I read the summary. The summary that described the findings as concerns raised by a temporary coordinator? Yes. Did you read the full technical report? Grant looked at Ethan's prediction beside the sensor data. Not until last night. Claire's voice was quiet. After the outage. Yes. Why? Grant pressed his fingertips against the edge of the table. We were already behind schedule. Ryan had concluded that the thermal variance fell within the system's safety margins. I accepted his judgment. You accepted the conclusion without reviewing the evidence, Helen said. Yes. Martin looked at him. You also authorized the conduct review. I authorized a review of whether Mr. Cole had exceeded his role. Did you authorize the removal of his server access? Grant glanced toward the Bridgepoint representatives. I approved a temporary restriction after the project team raised concerns about document control. Claire opened another file. His original report was reclassified. The photographs and invoice comparison were removed from the active project summary. Who authorized that? Grant's eyes moved to Ryan. Ryan sat straighter. The report contained technical conclusions written by someone without engineering authority. I separated the supporting material for review. You removed the evidence from the summary, Claire said. I prevented an unverified conclusion from circulating as fact. The part numbers were facts. The meaning of the variance required engineering review. And you were the engineer reviewing it. Yes, you dismissed it. I made a professional judgment. Claire looked at the sensor log. A woman lost power to her oxygen concentrator for 11 minutes because your professional judgment did not include looking at the part. Ryan's face tightened. No one has established that the module alone caused the outage. Claire opened the diagnostic sequence Ethan had attached. The internal control log records the module crossing its thermal threshold 4 minutes before the voltage irregularity. The auxiliary breaker tripped seconds after the second throttling event. There may have been contributing factors. There are always contributing factors. Claire's voice remained calm. That is why people inspect systems instead of defending assumptions. Ryan looked around the table. You are allowing a temporary employee with no degree to define engineering policy because of a personal relationship. The room went still. Claire did not raise her voice. My relationship with Ethan Cole is professional. You created his position? Yes. Outside the normal hiring process? Yes. You gave him direct access to you? Yes. And now you are presenting his interpretation as the basis for stopping a $60 million project. No, Claire stood. I am presenting physical evidence as the basis for stopping a project. She faced the entire board. My decision to create Ethan's position was not perfect. I should have established independent oversight from the beginning. I believed I was protecting a qualified man from a screening system that had reduced his life to missing credentials. She placed one hand on the red portfolio. Instead, I gave people a reason to question every finding he submitted. Her eyes moved from Ryan to Grant. That mistake belongs to me. No one interrupted. But my mistake does not change the equipment in the basement. It does not change the invoice. It does not change the sensor log. It does not change the fact that Ethan identified the failure before it occurred. Helen nodded slowly. What are you proposing? Claire closed the hiring documents and opened a new page. Immediate suspension of the launch. One of the Bridgepoint representatives sat forward. That would place the entire contract in breach. Claire continued. Independent inspection of every interface module installed across all 4 towers. The representative shook his head. That could take weeks. Preservation of all project records, including server access logs, report revisions, purchase orders receiving records, and supplier communications. Grant looked at her. Claire. She did not stop. Temporary suspension of Bridgepoint's work at Monongahela Heights. Emergency power support for medically vulnerable residents. Direct notification to the city housing office. Protection from retaliation for any employee or contractor who submitted safety concerns. Martin folded his arms. What about the financial exposure? We absorb it. That is not a number. No, it is a decision. Grant stepped away from the screen. Before the board votes, I need to say something. Claire looked at him. He removed the remote from his hand and placed it on the table. My concern throughout this project has been schedule stability, investor confidence, and Northline's ability to complete the residential program. He looked toward the distant towers beyond the rain. Those concerns were legitimate. Helen's expression did not change. Grant continued, but I gave them more weight than the evidence in front of me. Ryan turned toward him. Grant. Grant did not look at him. I received Mr. Cole's report. I accepted Ryan's conclusion because it supported the timeline I believed the company needed. His voice was steady, but the words came more slowly now. I told myself that relying on the lead engineer was responsible oversight. Last night I read the full report. I knew before I finished it that the components required physical inspection. Claire watched him. Why did you not call me? Grant looked down at the table. I did not yet know whether I was prepared to say I had been wrong. The honesty was not graceful. It was better than grace. He turned toward the board. I support an independent audit. I also support preserving every document related to the report and the access restriction. Ryan stared at him. You are accepting the conclusion before an independent analysis. No, Grant said. I am accepting that we do not have the right to continue without one. Martin looked at Claire's proposal. How long can the temporary power support serve the buildings? Northline can bring mobile units to the site by this afternoon, Claire said. Medical backup batteries can be distributed immediately. And the investors, Grant answered. I will contact them personally. Helen looked at him. What will you tell them? The truth. The word sounded unfamiliar in his mouth. Not because he had always lied, because he had spent years turning truth into language people could survive. Helen turned toward the board. I move that we approve the suspension and independent audit. Martin raised one hand. With an amendment. Claire waited. The audit must include procurement records from Monongahela Heights and every residential installation completed by Bridgepoint during the last 2 years. One of the Bridgepoint representatives stood. That is beyond the scope of this incident. Martin looked at him. So were the wrong parts. Helen accepted the amendment. The vote passed unanimously. Ryan remained seated. The 2 Bridgepoint representatives began speaking quietly to each other. Claire closed the laptop but left the red portfolio on the table. Grant gathered his papers. Claire, she looked at him. I will contact the investors, yes. I will also prepare a disclosure for the city. Include the outage, I know. Include Ethan's original report date. Grant paused. Yes. Ryan rose. You are making a public decision based on preliminary data. Claire faced him. You are suspended from sign-off authority on Monongahela Heights until the audit is complete. His face changed. You cannot do that without human resources. I can remove project authority where resident safety is concerned. Claire, this is personal. No. She looked at the module photograph still frozen on the wall. This is physical. At Monongahela Heights, Ethan sat in the community office with Grace beside him. School had closed because of the storm. Grace colored a page at a small table near the heater while Denise coordinated replacement batteries for residents. Marcus stood near the window checking his phone every few seconds. You think they voted? He asked. They are probably still talking, Ethan said. How can they still be talking? That is what rooms like that are built for. Grace looked up from her drawing. What are they talking about? Whether the buildings are safe. They are not. Marcus glanced at Ethan. Grace continued coloring. The lights went out. That does not mean everything is unsafe, Ethan said. She gave him the same look she used when adults offered weak explanations. You said safe and not broken are different. Ethan leaned back. I did say that. The office door opened. Mrs. Price entered with Denise supporting one arm. A portable battery unit hung from a strap over Denise's shoulder. Ethan stood. You should be upstairs. I've been upstairs all morning. Mrs. Price lowered herself into a chair. I wanted to see the man everyone is arguing about. Grace watched her carefully. Mrs. Price looked at Ethan. Did you break the power? No. Did you know it might break? I knew the installed part could fail under certain conditions. And you told them? Yes. Mrs. Price nodded. Then I hope they are arguing about why they did not listen. Ethan looked toward the floor. They are. His phone rang. Claire's name appeared on the screen. Marcus stopped moving. Ethan answered. Hello. The launch is suspended, Claire said. He closed his eyes. The board approved a full independent audit. All installed modules will be inspected. Bridgepoint's work is suspended. What about the residents' temporary generators are being delivered now? Medical backup units should arrive within 2 hours. Only then did Ethan breathe out. Good. Claire was quiet. You have been cleared to return to the site as a safety consultant during the audit. I do not need a title today. No. Her voice softened. But you deserve to know that no one in that room believes you caused the outage. Ethan looked at Grace. That is not the same as correcting what happened. We are correcting it. He heard exhaustion beneath her control. Did you stop it? Yes. What did it cost? Claire looked around the boardroom after everyone else had begun leaving. I do not know yet. Ethan remembered his own words in the empty site meeting room. Everyone cares until caring costs something. Thank you, he said. Claire leaned one hand against the table. For believing you for acting. The distinction mattered. She closed her eyes. I should have done it sooner. Yes. The answer hurt because he did not soften it. It also gave her something solid to stand on. I am coming to the site, she said. The roads are bad, I know. You have people there? I know. He understood she was not coming because Northline needed another executive. All right. When the call ended, Marcus stepped closer. Well, the launch is stopped. Marcus lifted both hands and let them fall against his sides. Thank God. Mrs. Price looked toward the dark television mounted in the corner. Tell them to fix it before they turn it on again. That is the plan, Ethan said. She pointed at him. Do not say plan like it means promise. Ethan nodded. No, ma'am. The first mobile generator arrived 40 minutes later. Northline crews set up medical support stations in each tower. Residents with refrigerated medicine received temporary cooling units. Hallway emergency batteries were replaced. Claire reached the complex shortly before sunset. The rain had weakened, but water still moved along the gutters. She found Ethan beneath the damaged awning outside Tower 3. Grace sat inside the community office with Denise. Ethan's coat was wet at the shoulders. Claire stopped beside him. You should be inside, so should you. For a while they watched workers unload power cables. Claire's hair had come loose near one temple. There were shadows beneath her eyes. The board approved everything she said. You told me. I also admitted that I handled your hiring badly. Ethan looked at her. You did. A faint breath left her almost a laugh. You do not make apologies easy. Easy apologies usually do not change anything. She nodded. I should have stopped installation when I received your report. Yes. I trusted Ryan's credentials more than I trusted the evidence. Yes. I trusted the board process more than I trusted my own judgment. Ethan looked toward the towers. That one I understand. Claire turned to him. You do. He placed both hands in his coat pockets. After Laura died, people offered help. Meals, rides, money. I refused most of it because I thought accepting help meant admitting I could not take care of Grace. What changed, I missed her school play because the car broke down and I would not call anyone. He watched a worker connect a cable to the temporary generator. Grace came home and told me that being dependable did not mean doing everything alone. Claire smiled faintly. She said that at 8-7. I would like to meet her when I am not the woman threatening her father's employment. You were not the one threatening it. I created the conditions. You also stopped them. Claire looked at him. You were right. That is not the part that matters. I know. She stepped closer. What matters to you, the equipment gets replaced. The residents are told what happened. No one who raises a concern gets treated the way I was. Claire studied his face, and after that, Ethan knew what she was asking. Not about the project. He looked through the community office window. Grace sat with Denise, carefully coloring the edge of a paper building. After that, I go home and make dinner. Claire lowered her gaze. The answer was not rejection. It was a boundary. She respected it. The independent audit began the following morning. A team from Hawthorne Safety Group arrived with sealed equipment cases, calibrated meters, and its own digital evidence system. Ethan met them in Tower 1. The lead auditor was a woman named Dr. Allison Pierce. She wore steel toe boots and asked no questions about Ethan's education. She asked him to show her what he had found. He walked her through the first module substitution, the thermal conditions, the delivery records, and the sensor data. Allison listened without interrupting. Then she inspected the equipment herself. By noon, her team had found 4 more lower-rated modules. By the end of the second day, the count reached 9. Every invoice listed the higher-rated model. Every installed unit was cheaper. The serial records did not match the receiving logs. On the 4th day, auditors discovered that several delivery forms had been edited after equipment arrived at the site. The original forms listed generic interface modules. Later versions listed the approved model numbers. The edits came from a Bridgepoint project account. The 6th day produced an email from a Bridgepoint manager to Ryan. The message did not instruct him to approve unsafe parts. It did tell him that further physical inspections would threaten the launch schedule and could trigger penalties under the contract. Ryan had replied with 4 words, "Understood. We will proceed." The 8th day revealed the full pattern. 19 modules had been substituted across the 4 towers. The difference in price was small enough to avoid immediate attention. Across all installed equipment, the savings became significant. Auditors traced the purchase discrepancy to a supplier employee who had rerouted the approved order after invoicing. A Bridgepoint project director had signed the revised receiving documents. The record suggested deliberate procurement fraud. The audit also examined Ethan's treatment inside Northline. Server logs showed that Ryan had changed the classification of Ethan's report from safety review to personnel concern. Grant had approved the temporary access restriction. Human Resources had acted without interviewing Ethan or reviewing the full evidence package. Claire read the findings alone in her office. The truth did not arrive as one dramatic revelation. It arrived as a list of ordinary decisions. A report renamed, an attachment removed, a review delayed, a signature given without inspection, a deadline treated as more real than a warning. Each act looked survivable by itself. Together, they had placed 428 homes at risk. Bridgepoint's project director was suspended and referred for criminal investigation. 2 employees at the supplier were placed on administrative leave. The city opened its own procurement review. Ryan lost sign-off authority on all residential projects and was placed on administrative leave pending a professional conduct investigation. Grant remained chief financial officer, but the board removed safety risk decisions from his sole oversight. A new compliance committee would report directly to the board. Grant accepted the decision without negotiation. Northline issued a statement to residents explaining that incorrect components had been installed. and that the launch would remain suspended until every unit was replaced and independently verified. The statement included the date of Ethan's original warning. It did not include the story of the red portfolio. Claire kept her promise. 12 days after the outage, Ethan returned to headquarters. He wore the same charcoal shirt he had worn to the janitorial interview. The repaired shoe had finally given out, so Grace had insisted he use part of his first paycheck to buy another pair. Megan met him outside Claire's office. "You look different," she said. "New shoes, I meant less likely to run away. I still know where the elevator is." Megan smiled and opened the door. Claire stood beside the windows. The red portfolio rested on the bookshelf again. A document lay on the desk between them. Ethan sat. Claire remained standing for a moment, then took the chair across from him rather than the one behind the desk. "Northline is creating a permanent field verification division for occupied residential buildings." Ethan looked at the document. "Because of the audit. Because the audit showed we had no independent process for confirming that installed equipment matched approved specifications." "What is the position, Director of Field Verification?" Ethan looked up. "I do not have a degree. I remember, I am not licensed to approve engineering designs. You will not approve designs. You will have authority to verify installed components, document site conditions, and stop work when physical conditions do not match approved plans. Who do I report to? The new Chief Safety Officer?" "Not you." "No." Claire slid the document closer. "Your technical certifications will be funded by Northline. Any final engineering approval will require a licensed engineer. Field verification will require your separate signature." Ethan read each page carefully. The salary was higher than anything he had earned before. The schedule allowed him to take Grace to school. The role included travel, but no overnight assignment could be required without his written agreement. "You added the school schedule. It was in your first application." He turned another page. "Protection from retaliation. Direct access to the Board Compliance Committee." He looked at her. "You changed the reporting line. I thought you would insist. I was going to. I am learning." Ethan read the final page. 30 days earlier, he had entered the building asking for a night shift and a mop. Now he held an offer that recognized work he had spent years being told did not count. He picked up the pen. "This is a job." "Yes." "Not repayment." "No." He signed. Claire watched him place the pen down. "There is one more thing." Ethan leaned back. "Is it in the contract?" "No." "Then I am listening." Claire folded her hands. "When Monongahela Heights is finished, and when you no longer report anywhere near my office, I would like to ask you to dinner." Ethan studied her. The woman across from him was still the chief executive officer of a company worth billions. She was also the woman who had stood beneath a broken awning and admitted she had been wrong. "Would that be appropriate?" he asked. "Probably not." A small smile appeared on his face. Claire's expression fell just enough for him to notice. He continued. "Ask me when the project is finished." Claire held his gaze. "All right." Ethan stood and picked up the signed offer. At the door, he looked back. "For the record, Grace has rules." Claire raised an eyebrow. "For dinner, for anyone who wants to spend time with me. How many rules?" "She updates the list." Claire smiled. "I have survived 14 investor rounds. That will not impress her. I was afraid of that." Ethan opened the door. Behind him, Claire looked toward the distant river. Below the gray Pittsburgh sky, temporary generators continued carrying power into Monongahela Heights, while crews began removing every module that should never have been installed. For the next 3 months, Monongahela Heights became a place of careful repair. Walls were opened. Wiring was traced. Every interface module was checked against its invoice serial number and approved specification. Marcus worked beside Ethan most mornings, no longer questioning why the man with the canvas tool bag had been given authority. When Ethan stopped a crew, they stopped. When he asked for a panel to be opened, someone opened it. Not because Claire Whitmore had hired him. Because the last time people ignored him, 428 families had spent 11 minutes in the dark. The repaired system was ready by early spring. Northline's communications team proposed a public launch with cameras, banners, and a stage in the courtyard. Claire declined all of it. "The residents do not need to watch us celebrate correcting our own failure," she said. On the morning the system went live, only residents, technicians, city inspectors, and one local reporter gathered in the Tower 1 basement. Denise stood beside the main control panel. Ethan checked the final readings and gave her a small nod. She flipped the switch. Nothing dramatic happened. No music played. No crowd cheered. The lights remained steady. The elevator continued moving. Battery levels settled into the safe range. On the third floor, Mrs. Price watched the green light on her oxygen concentrator. She waited for it to flicker. It did not. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she believed the electricity would stay. 3 days later, Claire returned to the site. This time, she wore work boots. Ethan noticed them as she entered the basement. "Those are new. I was informed my previous shoes were a safety problem. Who told you that a man who had been in my office less than an hour?" Ethan smiled. They walked between the replacement modules while the system hummed quietly around them. Claire stopped near the place where the failed unit had been removed. "The readings look good. Tower 1 is running 2 degrees cooler than projected. What changed facilities adjusted the boiler exhaust. Marcus found another blocked vent behind an old storage wall. So the buildings were still hiding things. They always are." Claire looked at him, and Ethan remembered the question from their first conversation. "People take longer." They stood in silence. Footsteps sounded on the stairs. Grace appeared in the doorway carrying a strip of inspection labels. Denise followed behind her. Grace looked around the basement with serious concentration. "Dad said the checked ones get labels." Ethan pointed toward the lower row. "You can mark those." Grace knelt and pressed the first label carefully onto the metal housing. Claire watched her straighten it twice. "She does not tolerate crooked work," Ethan said. "I noticed." Grace looked over her shoulder. "Are you?" Claire. Claire crouched beside her. "I am. Do you like my dad?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Grace, you said people should ask direct questions." Claire glanced at Ethan, then back at Grace. "Yes, I like your father, because he saved your company." Claire chose her words carefully. "I am grateful that he did, but I like him because he tells me the truth when it would be easier not to." Grace considered the answer. "That is a good reason." She handed Claire a label. "You can help. It has to be straight." Claire pressed the label onto the next module. Grace inspected it. A little left. Claire adjusted it. Grace nodded. "Better." Ethan turned away to hide his smile. Later, after Grace left with Denise, Claire found Ethan completing the final verification sheet. "The project is finished," she said. "It is. You report to someone who is not me." "I do. And the audit is closed." "Yes." Claire folded her hands in front of her. "I believe there was a question I was supposed to ask." Ethan set down his pen. "You remembered." "I remember important things." He looked at her for a moment. Claire Whitmore could command a boardroom without raising her voice. Yet standing in the basement waiting for his answer, she looked almost uncertain. "I would like to have dinner with you," she said. "Grace has rules. I have been warned. She may interview you. I have survived difficult interviews. Not like this one." Claire smiled. "I am willing to take the risk." Their first dinner took place at a small family restaurant overlooking the Monongahela River. Claire arrived early and reserved a private room. Ethan walked in, saw the empty tables, and stopped. "You rented the whole place." The manager suggested privacy. "Claire, this is a diner." She looked embarrassed. "I am not very good at ordinary." Ethan asked the manager to reopen the other tables. Soon the room filled with families, clattering dishes, and the smell of coffee. A baby cried near the window. 2 older men argued about baseball. A waitress called everyone honey. Claire slowly relaxed. They talked about Laura, about the years Claire had given to Northline, and about the ways grief could make a person mistake isolation for strength. "I built my life around avoiding anything Grace did not choose," Ethan said. "That sounds reasonable. It kept us standing." He looked at Claire across the table. "But standing still and being safe are not always the same thing." Claire reached across the table and rested her hand beside his. She did not take his hand. She left the choice to him. After a moment, Ethan covered her fingers with his. 6 months later, Pittsburgh entered a brutal summer heat wave. Monongahela Heights reached its highest electrical demand since the system launched. Every module remained within range. The elevators ran. The hallway lights stayed steady. Mrs. Price slept through the night without checking her oxygen concentrator. At Ethan's apartment, Grace sat on the floor building a model microgrid for her school science fair. Claire held 2 wires between her fingers. "These do not fit." Grace took them from her. "You run a battery company. I have people for the small wires." Ethan laughed from the kitchen. That explained several things. Claire threw a paper label toward him. Later, Ethan stood at the window. Across the river, the 4 towers of Monongahela Heights glowed against the dark. Claire joined him. 8 years earlier, Ethan had walked through snow to return a stranger's future. He had expected nothing. Years later, Claire had opened a door for him. But it was Ethan's work, his courage, and his refusal to look away that carried him through it. Claire reached for his hand. This time, he took hers without hesitation. Behind them, Grace called from the floor, "You are supposed to be helping." Ethan looked once more at the distant lights. Then he turned back toward his daughter and the woman beside her. The city continued humming beyond the glass. 428 homes remained bright along the river, exactly as they were supposed to be.